The Great Learning was one of the 4 books in Confucianism. The Great Learning had come from a chapter in the Classic of Rites which formed one of the 5 classics. It consists of a short main text attributed to the teachings of Confucius and then 10 commentary chapters accredited to one of Confucius' disciples, Zengzi. The ideals of the book were supposedly Confucius's, however the text was written after his death. The 4 books were selected by the Neo-Confucian Zhou during the Song dynasty as a foundational introduction to Confucianism and examinations for the state civil service in China came to follow his lead. Writing and influence. Confucius, who incorporated ideas from earlier philosophers, compiled or edited the Classic of Rites and the Spring and Autumn Annals, 2 of the 5 classics. Confucius' student master Zengzi wrote the introduction and exposition of the Great Learning. Zengzi lived from 505–436 BC. Confucius taught 3,000 pupils, of which 72 mastered the 6 arts. It is still unclear how much his students wrote and edited. The Great Learning developed from many authors adapting to the needs and beliefs of the community at the time. The Chang brothers, Yi and Hao, both utilized the Great Learning's philosophies. Their ideas met with strong official opposition, but were reconstituted by Zhou. Chang's idea of Yi was that it was identical with nature, which he believed was essentially good. Chang's Yi emphasized the necessity of acquiring knowledge. During the Southern Song dynasty, Zhou rearranged the Great Learning and included it in the 4 books, along with the doctrine of the mean, the Analects of Confucius and the Mencius. Zhou separated the Great Learning, which was originally a chapter in the Classic of Rites. Zhou organized the book as Jing, followed by 10 expositions. Zhou was a student of Li Tong. Zhou developed the Chang's Confucian ideas and drew from Chan Buddhism and Daoism. He adapted some ideas from these competing religions into his form of Confucianism. Liao, a scholar, poet, and official, used and brought attention to the Great Learning. After the Song and Yuan dynasties, the Great Learning became a required textbook in schools and a required reading for imperial examinations. During the Warring States, Zengzi and Mengzi were influenced by the Great Learning. The Great Learning was used by Japan, Korea, and later in the West. Such critics such as Liu Angshan and Wang Yangming later disliked the Great Learning because of the stress on scholarship rather than action. Wang Yangming rejected Zhou's changes and returned the text to the original from the Classic of Rites. During the Han Dynasty, the Great Learning rose to prominence, and the Classic of Rites had to be reorganized by Dai and Daishang. The Dais divided the book into 5 sections. This included the Great Learning, the doctrine of the mean, the evolution of rites, the Yili, and the etiquette and rites. There is a popular commentary by philosopher Zhang written by his disciples. Han Yu and Liao both used the Great Learning. Liao incorporated a lot of Buddhist and Taoist ideas into his work. Zengzi, Confucius's grandson, is said to have taught Mencius and written the doctrine of the mean. He may also have written the beginning of the Great Learning. Mao Yung edited the Great Learning in the Han Dynasty, giving his views of the general meaning. Principal teachings, achieving a state of balance and refining one's moral self such that it is a reflection of the way, ample rest and reflection such that one achieves peace of mind. When one is calm and reflected, the way will be revealed to them. Setting priorities and knowing what is important is essential in one's quest for moral refinement, for it allows one to focus on that which is of the greatest importance and that which is in line with the way as outlined in Confucian teachings. One must bring his affairs and relationships into order and harmony. If one hopes to attain order in the state, he must first bring his own family and personal life into order through self-cultivation and the expansion of one's knowledge and the investigation of things. Each and every man is capable of learning and self-cultivation regardless of social, economic or political status. This, in turn, means that success in learning is the result of the effort of the individual as opposed to an inability to learn. One must treat education as an intricate and interrelated system where one must strive for balance. No one aspect of learning is isolated from the other, and failure to cultivate a single aspect of one's learning will lead to the failure of learning as a whole. Meaning of investigation of things. The text sets up a number of controversies that have underlain Chinese philosophy and political thinking. For example, one major controversy has been to define exactly the investigation of things. What things are to be investigated and how has been one of the crucial issues of Chinese philosophy. One of the first steps to understanding the Great Learning is to understand how to investigate things. This did not consist of scientific inquiry and experimentation, but introspection, building on what is already known of principle. True introspection was supposed to allow the mind to become all-knowing with regards to morality, relationships, civic duty and nature. Main text. What the Great Learning teaches is to illustrate illustrious virtue, to renovate the people, and to rest in the highest excellence. The point where to rest being known, the object of pursuit is then determined, and that being determined, an unperturbed calmness may be attained to. To that calmness there will succeed a tranquil repose. In that repose there may be careful deliberation, and that deliberation will be followed by the attainment of the desired end. Things have the root and the branches. Affairs have their end and the beginning. To know what is first and what is last will lead near to what is taught in the Great Learning. The ancients who wished to illustrate illustrious virtue throughout the world first ordered well their own states. Wishing to order well the states, they first regulated the families. Wishing to regulate the families, they first cultivated the persons. Wishing to cultivate the persons, they first rectified the hearts. Wishing to rectify the hearts, they first sought to be sincere in the thoughts. Wishing to be sincere in the thoughts, they first extended to the utmost of the knowledge. Such extension of knowledge lay in the investigation of things. Things being investigated, knowledge became complete. The knowledge being complete, the thoughts were sincere. The thoughts being sincere, the hearts were then rectified. The hearts being rectified, the persons were cultivated. The persons being cultivated, the families were regulated. The families being regulated, the states were rightly governed. The states being rightly governed, the entire world was at peace. For the Son of Heaven down to the mass of the people, all must consider the cultivation of the person the root of everything besides. It cannot be, when the root is neglected, that what should spring from it will be well ordered. It never has been the case that what was of great importance has been slightly cared for, and, at the same time, that what was of slight importance has been greatly cared for. The Great Learning is significant because it expresses many themes of Chinese philosophy and political thinking, and has therefore been extremely influential both in classical and modern Chinese thought. Government, self-cultivation and investigation of things are linked. It links together individual action in the form of self-cultivation with higher goals such as ultimate world peace, as well as linking together the spiritual and the material, basing its authority on the presumed practices of ancient kings rather than nature or deities. The Great Learning both links the spiritual with the practical, and creates a vision of the way that is presented by Taoism. The Great Learning and education in China. The Great Learning as we know it today is the result of multiple revisions and commentaries by a number of Confucian and Neo-Confucian scholars. The Great Learning, along with the doctrine of the mean, had the beginnings as chapters within the Book of Rites. Both were removed from the Book of Rites and designated as separate, and equally significant, works by Zhou Shi. In the winter of 1190 CE, Zhou published the Four Masters, a collection of the Great Learning, Doctrine of the Mean, the Mencius and the Analects. These four texts soon became the initial basis of study in the Chinese imperial examination system. Zhou was prompted to refine the Great Learning and incorporate it into the curriculum as he felt that the previously utilized classics were lengthy and too difficult to comprehend by the common individual to be used as an educational foundation for Confucian thought. Utilizing the much shorter and more comprehensible four books would allow Zhou to reach a much greater audience. To aid in comprehension of the Great Learning, he spent much of his life studying the book and published a series of commentaries explaining the principal teachings of the text. The Dazu itself gets its name from Ta Jianxi Shui, referring to the education of adults. Unlike many scholars before him, Zhou presents the Great Learning as the way of self-cultivation and governance that is to be studied by all people, not only those in or seeking political office. Impact on the education in China. Although the imperial examination system is no longer used as a means of determining one's place in the social hierarchy, education and the teachings of the Great Learning remain an integral part of modern educational and political culture in China. In fact, a number of scholars believe that all education in mainland China is based on Confucianism to some degree, although many individuals, students and teachers alike, are unaware of the Confucian influence on their education. The Great Learning was written and later published as its own book, to serve as an introduction and foundational guide for the further study of Confucian texts. The Great Learning provides a step-by-step illustration of how all aspects of society, ranging from the refinement of the self to the order within one's household estate, is ultimately dependent upon the expansion of one's knowledge. Effects on the education in modern China. A valued education. China is characterized by a great appreciation for education, as it is still viewed as a means of securing a rewarding career, thus elevating an individual in terms of social status. The modern schooling system relates directly to the teachings of the Great Learning, as educational institutions represent the primary sites for the expansion of knowledge and the investigation of things. Quote, "It is quite common in China for great sums of money to be spent to secure the best possible education. Due to the high value of a quality education, illiteracy and dropout rates throughout China are very low. Memorization. Due to the service examination system, which involved the memorization and recitation of Confucian texts, including the Great Learning, memorization remains a key element in Chinese learning. Throughout much of China, it is still held that one should memorize as much knowledge as they possibly can, as one is incapable of the creation of intelligent thought without first obtaining enough basic knowledge. The focus on exams and the recitation of knowledge is, however, often attributed to surface learning. But one should note that memorization is not used in isolation, but represents only one aspect of a student's quest for knowledge and self-cultivation. This focus on memorization can be seen in the consistency in which Chinese students excel in mathematics and sciences, working collaboratively due to the Confucian values of harmony, relationship and moral cultivation as presented in the Great Learning. Students in China were traditionally taught the value of collaborative learning. To this day, group learning remains the most popular learning method throughout the bulk of China. Hard work. The Great Learning states that all people are to expand the knowledge and cultivate themselves. This, in turn, is often interpreted to mean that all people are capable of learning, and that failure is not a result of a lack of ability, but a lack of effort. As a result of this philosophy, Chinese students are known worldwide as being very hard-working. putting a great deal of effort into everything they do. A respectful learning atmosphere due largely to the high value of quality education and the Confucian teaching of respect for one's elders. Educators in Chinese culture are treated with the utmost respect. In fact, teachers are customarily granted the same level of respect given to a parent. As a result of this level of respect for educators and the institution as a whole, students are not quick to interrupt or otherwise challenge the authority of those delivering the knowledge required for a successful future. Impact on Chinese politics. The Great Learning played a major role in Chinese politics as it comprised one of the texts incorporated into the imperial service examination system. Students would be tested on the knowledge of the 5 classics and 4 books as a qualification for an occupation in political office. If a student possessed adequate knowledge of the texts, they would be awarded a prestigious place in government. These exams allow anyone of sufficient knowledge and skill to obtain a place in office, as exams were based solely on one's ability. One's social or financial status did not play a role in the exam system. The text of The Great Learning provides an educational basis for those aspiring to obtain a leadership role. In addition to self-cultivation and the expansion of one's knowledge, The Great Learning goes into a significant step-by-step detail with respect to the qualities of a proper ruler. The text then goes on to describe the projected quality and stability of the state if its ruler follows the guidelines described therein. One such passage states that a person should cultivate himself, then regulate the family, then govern the state, and finally lead the world into peace. There are 2 common interpretations of this passage. One common interpretation of this passage is that before one can hope to successfully lead the people, she must first cultivate himself by bringing order to. One may also interpret this passage to be stating that once one has reached a sufficient level of cultivation, she should seek a position in office with which to lead the people of the state in accordance with the values and practices outlined in the Great Learning and other such Confucian and Neo-Confucian texts. A term used in the text, Qin-min, which James Legge, following Zhou amended to Shin-min, and translated renovating the people instead of loving the people. It became the name of the People First Party, one of the minor parties in Taiwan. Textual significance. The Great Learning is significant because it expresses many themes of Chinese philosophy and political thinking, and has therefore been extremely influential both in classical and modern Chinese thought. The Great Learning represented a key aspect of the Chinese curriculum for nearly 1,500 years and can be found in virtually all aspects of Chinese culture. The Great Learning within the Chinese curriculum acted as a springboard for further learning, self-cultivation and investigation of things. Through self-cultivation one can bring order and harmony to one's mind, personal life, family, state and the world as a whole. By defining the path of learning in governmental and social terms, the Great Learning links the spiritual realm with daily life, thus creating a vision of the way that is radically different from that of non-action as presented by Daoism. The Great Learning, on the other hand, requires action on the part of the individual towards the ultimate goal of self-cultivation through the expansion of knowledge and the investigation of things. The Great Learning presents Confucianism as being this worldly rather than otherworldly, as opposed to basing its authority on an external deity. The Great Learning bases its authority on the practices of ancient kings. Works cited: Birthrong, John H. Transformations of the Confucian Way. Westview Press, 1998. Confucius, and Chicheng-Hu Wang. The Analects of Confucius, LUNU, Oxford University Press US, 1997. http Books, Google, California. Books, It equals WQYM0 Cod 33 megacoulombs an amp. PG equals PA13 an amp. LPG equals PA13 an amp. DQ equals book plus of plus rights plus history an amp. Source equals web an amp. OTS equals yields for E1J and amp. SIG equals GRNI0 ZPCT Flendit K5LBODOA an amp. HL equals N an amp. SAR equals X an amp. OI equals book underscore result an amp. Resnum equals 8 an amp. Court equals result hash par 11. M1. Daxway. Encyclopedia Britannica Online. 2008. Encyclopedia Britannica, the 27th of October 2008, and LT, http, www.britannica.com. Checked. Topic 579,524. Daxway and GT. The Barry, Theodore A. Al. Sources of Chinese Tradition. From Earliest Times to 1600. Columbia University Press. 2000. Gardner, Daniel K. Confucian Commentary and Chinese Intellectual History. The Journal of Asian Studies, Volume 57, No. 2. 397 to 422. Gardner, Daniel K. The Four Books. The Teachings of the Later Confucian Tradition. Hackett Publishing, 2007. Gardner, Daniel K. Principle and Pedagogy. HSI and the Four Books. Harvard Journal of Asiatic Studies, Volume 44, No. 1. 57 to 81. Legge, James. Confucius, Confucian Analects, The Great Learning and the Doctrine of the Mean. New York, Dover 1971. McGivering, Jill. China's Thriving Confucian Schools. 2008. October 28, 2008. And LT, http, news, BBC, co, UK/2/High/Asia-Pacific/7169814.SDM and GT, PAP blog, Human Rights Facts, China, Confucianism and Authoritarianism, 2008. And LT, http, Philip Spagnoli, WordPress.com, the 20th of August 2008. Human Rights Facts 55 China, Confucianism and Authoritarianism, and GT. Pound, Ezra, Tar Hio. The Great Learning newly rendered into the American language. London, The Kinnick Press for Stanley Not Limited, 1936. Wang, Ting. Understanding Chinese Culture and Learning. Dis. U of Canberra, Australia, 2006. Words, Richard, 2008. Chinese Classic Texts. Yao, Xinzhong and HSIN Chung Nao. An Introduction to Confucianism. Cambridge University Press, 2000. Zhang, Vi Yuan. Conceptions of Lifelong Learning in Confucian Culture, Their Impact on Adult Learners. International Journal of Lifelong Education, Volume 27, No. 5. 551 to 557. Zhouxi, Enway News. Com. Enway, China, 2007.